Hello, farmers, and welcome to the harvest season. My name is Al,
And my name is Greg.
and we're here today to, well, not really talk about farming games.
Well,
Kind
I
of,
have topics. I have farming topics I can bring up. Don't rule me out just yet, Al.
we will talk about farming games, just not specifically about. Yeah, we'll just get into it, and we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah,
Why am I trying to preempt things? Why am I trying to preempt
it's
things?
going to be
Welcome,
exciting.
Greg.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I think a lot of the listeners to this podcast also listen to the kind of main other podcast you're on, the Pokemon podcast. But for those who don't, is there anything you want to introduce yourself as?
You may have heard me on a couple of podcasts. The big one, if you're a Pokemon fan, is It's Super Effective, where I've been a co-host for a chunk of time now. And if you like actual play role-playing games, then you may have heard of Very Random Encounters, which is my other podcast. The one that I actually have to do a lot of work for, unlike It's Super Effective.
Yes, one you just turn up and talk, and the other one you actually.
The other
have
one
to
I actually
do
run all the
something.
social media for and have to connect to publishers and talk to all sorts of people.
Yeah, it's a lot more work actually running a podcast. I found when I started.
Uh-huh.
doing it.
That's why I don't do any of my own. And I don't even do the editing for VRE. Like, that's the deal. I am the extroverted person that talks to all the people and gets us things lined up. And Wheels and Logan just edit, and I never have to learn how to do that. And I've never started another podcast because I have no idea how editing works. None.
Sounds
No
like a
clue.
good distribution of skills there.
Yeah. We play to our strength.
Definitely. Well, anyway, thank you for joining us. This episode, I wanted to get Greg on because Greg doesn't really like farming games, and I wanted to talk about why. I thought that could be quite interesting, so we'll talk about that later. Before that, we've got a little bit of news, not a huge amount, but a wee bit. And then, first of all, Greg, what have you been playing recently?
Well, I'm still heavily into Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO, which is a brilliant game. And I will bring up a section that may interest you later.
Interesting.
And of course, I've been running the Pokemon stuff. I was playing Metopia, and then I do a bunch of tabletop games. So it's sort of weird. It's like, what have I been playing? Well, I've been playing a ton of tabletop games, which most people are like, okay, which ones? I'm like, okay, well, this gets complicated. But I've been playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing my own game, Glitter Hearts. Since pandemic, they're all run online, so it's kind of like running a video game because I'm talking to virtual people.
A definite blurring of the lines there, yes.
Yeah.
Cool. I haven't actually played Metopia yet. It's on my list to play. Have you been enjoying it?
Yeah, so Metopia is at its heart a JRPG light. Like, you don't really have a lot of control over what happens. It's much more about taking me's of your friends and celebrities and putting them in ridiculous situations and just watching those things play out because they're super funny. And the gameplay, I mean, it is just an RPG. So there's a storyline that's very basic. And if you're just sort of like there for, I can pop in for 15, 20, 25 minutes, just play around for a bit and then pop back out again. Like, it doesn't ask a lot of you. So it's fun to just sort of pop in, do a couple of vignettes, get the charm out of it, and then go on to other things.
Fair enough. I tend to have it. I never really get into playing a little bit of a couple of games each day. I tried it with Animal Crossing and I just never really got into that. I basically binged Animal Crossing for like 3 months and then never played it again because I can't get into the rhythm of like, I'm just going to play this game for like 10 or 15 minutes and then do something else because I don't like the kind of switching between games. I think part of it is a brain thing, right? Like, I don't like to kind of just go, right, I'm done with that just now. I'll go on to something else. But I also think it's partly the actual act of switching, in that if it was, say, how the PS5 works, where you actually have multiple games saved in a specific state and you just swap between them, and it's like both were running at the same time, I'd probably be more likely to do it. But games just take so long to load up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I do. And I will say, like, I don't necessarily play Metopia that way. I will put aside a couple of hours to play for a bit, and then I'm like, okay, I don't need to touch it again for a week.
Fair enough.
But like Will, does the pop, like, has segmented out. My friend, you know Will. He has very segmented time that he does things in those bursts. So Metopia can easily fit into that if that's how you want to play game.
Maybe I just need a Switch per game.
There you go. Nintendo would love you for that.
Well, we do have 4 Switches in this house.
Well,
so I could
what
do
are you
like
complaining about? You could easily make your dream come true, Al.
Just what game do I want to play? Let me get out my Animal Crossing Switch. Let me get out my Metopia Switch.
It doesn't sound like a bad life.
No,
it sounds like a dream.
It does sound. Is that better or worse than them just sitting in my display? I don't know.
I mean,
I am a terrible human being.
Live the life the way that makes you happy.
Oh dear. Anyway, speaking of which, I have been playing The Legend of Zelda and what's the next one? The Adventure of Link, I think it's called. 1 and 2. I've been playing them the last couple of days because listeners will know that I played through every Super Mario game last year, or the end of last year, beginning of this year, because I realized I hadn't completed any of them other than Odyssey. And then I also thought, well, let me do the same for Zelda, because the only game I've played is Breath of the Wild. So I have now completed 1, and I'm halfway through 2. So that has mostly been it for me, I think. And my usual Pokemon Go, of course.
Well, of course. I mean, if we're going to go to mobiles, then we got another conversation on our hands, because I got a whole bunch of stuff that I do on that phone while I'm sitting on conference calls.
Well, I mean, they are games. Games are games, right?
I mean, yes. I mean, so I'm playing Pokemon Masters, Pokemon Go. I got sucked into Project Makeover. I still play just Dragalia Lost.
That's quite a few. I think I just have Go on the go. Again, I don't like lots of games running at once.
I mean, I play Go. It's dumb to play it sitting in my one office because I don't want to spend an incense, and I don't want, like, if I'm going to spend an incense, then I feel like I need to be in Go for the time that the incense is running.
Yes, yeah.
And so that's like an hour, and I'm like, I don't want to devote an hour to this of sitting up in my office. So now now that I can go back to things, so I play Go on my way to the gym and back, and then for big events. But also there's just not a lot happening in Go, like there.
I do tend to play it more when there are events going on. So I played it a lot when trying to complete the anniversary catch challenge.
Yeah, and then this upcoming, I got a lot to do this weekend.
As usual, the GoFest has been arranged on the weekend that I have something else planned. It's like a yearly thing that I do on the exact same weekend. I can't organize when it is, so I can't like change the weekend.
Right.
And for some reason, GoFest is also the exact same weekend every year. So I will probably not get to play it as much as I want to. But I've spent my money and I will do the quests. Sadly, it looks like the costume Pokemon, you actually you get them as a snapshot after you've completed the quest line, which makes me which sounds like if you don't do it during the day, then you won't get it. But I feel like that can't be the case.
You'd think that, but they have done this before.
I know.
I mean, you just have to rely on those of us who will be there catching extras.
Yeah.
And then being able to
get and then I can trade
Scotland.
with all of the people that I know in America.
It's potential I could end up in England next year.
Well, yeah,
sure.
That is true. If you come to Worlds, we'll definitely see you at Worlds. I'm 100% planning on going to Worlds.
If Worlds happens and I go, and I had a dream. So I had a dream that I lost my passport. Because I don't have a passport. And so in my dream, I was like, oh, I have to re-get a passport. And I woke up like, okay, I get it. Yes, I know. I need to get a passport at some point. Everything has been closed, brain. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this level of anxiety to my evening.
Yes, when I have to pay for something and it expires, I'm not going to get it until I need it.
Yes. I mean, I had a plan because Worlds was coming up, and I had a plan. I had everything set at the end of 2019 to do the whole
Yeah.
passport thing, and
Yeah.
then suddenly it was no. And I'm like,
Yes.
okay, my brain is still stuck on the task. I have not checked off the task mark, get a passport, but you can let it go because other things have happened and I'm not leaving the country.
Yeah, I actually had my hotel and flight booked
Ugh.
for it, and so I had to deal with all the fun of getting that cancelled. And I think one of them ended up being a voucher because I was like, oh, I'll definitely use something on that before, but I need to check when its expiry date is because
Yeah, it's soon, I bet.
I'm not sure whether it's the end of this year or the end of next year. If it's the end of next year, that's fine, but if it's the end of this year, uh-oh.
Yeah, well, you're getting another vacation time coming up.
Oh, dear. It's fine. It wasn't a huge amount of money, thankfully. Uh anyway, yeah, that's what we've been playing. Let's talk about some news. So there's just a couple of pieces of news. Is that the right term for newses?
Yes?
We'll go with it.
I mean, I don't know what else you would say. Tidbits of news,
Newses.
articles of news, newsies lifeblood.
The first thing is that we've got an update on the Stardew Valley 1.5 update for mobile, and that's just that it is still coming.
Here's news. I didn't know Stardew Valley was on mobile.
Oh, really? No, it's it's actually quite good on mobile. It's not. I don't think I'd play it there because still, I think the Switch is the best place to play it. Other than, I guess, PC has its advantages. But for a game that has been ported to a touchscreen only thing, it's worked quite well. You kind of tap where you want to go, and they've changed the menu to work better with touch. It works quite well.
Nice.
Yes, so Concerned Ape has said that apparently they needed to get a new developer to port the new update. So that has obviously extended things. But it is still coming. He promises it is still coming. Just be patient. And I'm sure all of the people, because, gamers are traditionally very patient people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The other piece of news is that there is a documentary on Spiritfarer coming out on 2 days ago when this podcast comes out. So that's being done by The Escapist. And yeah, I think they did one. Was it on Hades they did before? They did another one, and I can't remember. I think it might have been Hades or it might have been something else. And it was very good. It's so good that I've forgotten what it was about.
It made a real big impression, didn't it?
Look, I consume a lot of stuff, okay? I can't remember everything.
I know. I just watched the Loki finale right before coming.
Yeah, I watched it at lunchtime, and obviously we don't want to spoil it for anyone.
No.
But yeah.
But wow, Loki. Boy, they sure did Loki.
They did a thing. And,
they did the Loki.
And it was an episode. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about the documentary. It's not out yet, but although it will be out when this podcast comes out. So there'll be a link to it in the show notes, if I remember.
You will. I believe in you.
Thank you, Greg. I like to put a lot of time and effort into my show notes. And yeah. I have no idea. It's one of those things where you've no idea whether anybody ever actually uses them.
Yeah,
it makes me feel good.
There are definitely people who do. Like, I can confirm that there are definitely a segment of people who look at the show notes. I am not one of them. But when we don't include them, we hear from that segment of people.
Yeah. It's always annoying when like someone mentions something and you swipe over to the show notes and you're like, oh, they didn't include a link. Now I have to actually go back
now I have to go
and listen to what they said and go Google it, and so much effort.
Worst.
Part of the problem is, although like basically all of the stuff I do other than my day job is audio, I am really bad at taking information in the audio format.
Oh, good.
So
you're a natural fit for the podcast format.
What can I say? I think it works. But it's like, every time I listen to It's Super Effective and Will does the Pokemon of the Week, I'm like, I did not listen to any of that.
Yeah.
I need to wait till it's in written form.
I have to trust myself to, because I have my notepad that I keep track of everything and keep Pokemon of the Week. And like last week, in the middle of it, I got distracted, so I didn't write down my clues or anything. And I looked at it and we started up the episode. I'm like, ooh, guess what I forgot to do? write anything in the blank about Pokemon of the Week. Well, I'm gonna try to get it while you're giving me the easy clues, and I got Bulbapedia up.
Yeah, I think that's the problem is it's when you're listening to something and then you stop listening to it, it takes a while for you to realize that you're not listening to it. You're
Yeah.
just like, I think I blacked out for 5 minutes there.
I went
And when you're listening
elsewhere.
to a podcast at 1.7 times, that's a lot of time.
You're one of those people.
I am. I don't do it for kind of more highly produced ones like things like Serial and stuff where it's more of a like we are creating an art piece for you to listen to. If it's just people talking, then yeah, I tend to listen on 1.7 times. I tweak it depending on who's talking because some people talk too slowly or too quickly. But 1.7 is the baseline for me.
Shameful.
Anyway.
Shameful.
Well, what can I say? What can I say? I've got things to do in my life. I listen to too many podcasts. I wouldn't listen to them all if I didn't listen to them faster.
One would argue that maybe you shouldn't be listening to as many podcasts. My podcast habits died when I can't drive in my car to my job and back. Like now that I'm going back to the gym, I have podcast listening time again, but I write for a living.
Yeah.
So I can't have another person talking at me because I find out that I start transcribing. And I'm like, this whole section does not fit with anything else I was doing.
Yeah. It's interesting because like obviously being a programmer, you'd think that it would be one that would be really bad for listening to podcasts, but it actually works really well because a lot of it is just kind of, it's a different part of my brain that's doing the logic side of things. And if I listen to a podcast, it stops my brain chattering about random things.
Yeah.
So I stop thinking, oh, I need to go and take the bin out or do that or whatever. I've got someone else occupying that part of the brain and I can just let the other part go ahead and do its job, which is nice. But I can definitely see how that wouldn't work if your job is related to words.
Yes, when I actually have to write things for people to read and understand. Me typing in Pokemon of the Week in the middle of it does not help anybody. It does not go over well.
No, especially if you miss it.
Yeah.
You've done it. Oh, dear. Anyway, that's the news, I think, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get Greg on because Greg likes going on podcasts and I like talking to Greg. So yes. I thought it would be good to discuss farming games with you. So before we get any further, you've said that you've played some farming games before. What are they, and what's your background with them?
So the main farming game that I can remember playing was Harvest Moon. Is it Harvest Moon? Is that the one? Is that the famous one?
Harvest
something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Harvest Moon, yeah.
Harvest Moon. So I played Harvest Moon.
The original one.
Way, way, way back in the day. I don't know if
Yeah.
it was the original one or was the one that came after or...
It's
one of the early ones.
The original one that was actually released in English. The actual very first one was only released in Japan,
yes.
I think.
Yeah, on the Super NES. I played that one. And I know I know I played that one. Could I remember anything about it? No, it was 97, and I barely remember most things from the last 10 years, much less that long time ago. So I remember playing that. And I remember enjoying it. But I've since tried to play Stardew Valley. I've tried to play, what was the other? There's a super big one I tried playing, and I don't remember the name of it.
Story of Seasons.
Yeah, I think that was it.
It's the same series as the original Harvest Moon. The new Harvest of Moon is a different series, so just to be confusing.
Yeah, thanks everybody. thanks for keeping it in the family.
It's the worst situation.
And I run into the sort of same problem that I've run into it with a lot of games, but in particular, I have this problem with farming games where, like, it's my Animal Crossing problem, right? Like, I start to grow resentful of games that require me to come in
Mm.
every day
Yeah.
and hurt me if I don't. And so I get very resentful very quickly of a
Yeah.
game that demands how I have to play it.
Yeah.
And that if I don't do that this time, then there will be consequences. And I'm like, guess what? I'm an adult. I have a lot of other things going on. And there also comes a point in all farming games where I realize that why my home and yard is a disaster, and yet I'm sitting in this game doing the things that I should be doing in my home and yard,
Yeah.
and maybe I should do that instead. And so I have a constant struggle with farming games where, and the third part, and this is what happened with my Stardew Valley run, because I literally played the first day of Stardew Valley, and I have a thing in my head where I have to take, in a lot of these games, I feel like I either take the optimal path or why am I even playing?
Yeah.
And so the very first day, I couldn't find my home, and so I passed out outside. And I'm like, well, I have to start over because this is an unacceptable outcome. This is a non-ideal outcome. I don't even know. I couldn't even find my house. So I'm starting over.
Yeah.
And so then it comes a thing like, then I start research. So then I'll do this thing where I start researching what the best path for playing these games are.
Oh,
And then my
yeah.
brain's like,
That's a deep hole.
well, now you've played the game and you don't actually need to do it. You're done. You found the ultimate path. You don't really need to see it play out. And so I don't. But this is coming to a head where I'm not going to be able to avoid playing a farming game.
No.
Because Final Fantasy XIV is introducing a Stardew Valley mode in the next expansion. And so I'm going to I'm going to have to figure out how to play a farming game, because you get to have your own house and your crops and all the critters that you have collected, all your minions. You get to live on your farm and you raise animals and design your house. And I'm like, well, I already played that game a lot, so now I'm going to have to learn how to play the Stardew Valley farming game in Final Fantasy XIV. And everybody assumes, like I'm assuming, it's on the moon. So you're cultivating land on the moon. Because we all know we're going to the moon. That's the big thing.
Okay.
Endwalker is taking us to the moon. We know we're going to the moon. They have shown the moon. They have said we're going to the moon. So I'm assuming my farm is on the moon.
I'm not going to question that. I'll just let that one go.
It's Final Fantasy. You can't question it. It makes perfect Final Fantasy logic.
I'll be totally honest with you. I've never played a Final Fantasy game, so.
Well,
but that's probably a whole other conversation.
I don't blame you. They are the quintessential JRPG, right? Like, they are very much the landscape upon which everything else has been built and spread off of. So, like, you can tie exactly how Pokemon Generation 1 worked to Final Fantasy. Like, the lines are very direct. So if you have any interest in sort of seeing how the JRPG genre really started to kick off, it's, Final Fantasy 1, which, it's called Final Fantasy because Final Fantasy 1 was called Final Fantasy because it was their last game, and if it didn't succeed, they were going to go out of business, so they called it their Final Fantasy. And it was either success, we continue as a company, failure, we're done. And so Final Fantasy has stayed Final Fantasy because now it's the series. Right. We're up to 15 now.
Is it only 15?
Only 15.
Feels like it's 100.
It does. Well, I mean, and we're not even talking about spin-off games. Like, we aren't talking about tactics, and we aren't talking about all the things that are that branch out from the Final Fantasy series, all the mobile games. Yeah. It's become its own thing. And Final Fantasy 1, which you can get on mobile phone now. You can get anywhere. It's cheap, and they're re-releasing it because they always re-release it. It's a very simple RPG, right? Like, it was made in 1990 or sometime
Yeah.
around there, and it was like a very basic everything. And so for me, I don't play all the Final Fantasies because I don't enjoy all of them. Like some of them aren't the style of gameplay that I like. Like Final Fantasy 12 used very MMO controls, but not in an MMO setting, and that really bothered me. Those controls really
Yeah.
bothered me in a first-person game. And 13 just didn't interest me, and I never finished 8. But 7, which is a brilliant game, is a very good game. But sort of so. Long story short, like I get the RPG aspects of it, but part of RPGs are optimization and
Yeah.
finding the best way to get past an obstacle. And so my brain works that way when I approach farming games. And since I have to figure out the optimal way of doing things, and
Yeah.
farming games are like, here are the 15,000 paths you can do,
Yeah.
I get lost very, very easily.
Yeah. I mean, they do tend to have like a best way to do them if you actually pay attention. But as you mentioned, then you know that. I think part of the issue is that the satisfaction in playing a farming game is the actual playing of the farming game.
Mm-hmm.
It's not actually the solving the problems. I quite often talk about these things as being they're not actively games. They're more something to keep your hands busy. They're
Mm-hmm.
calming. They're meant to be a relaxing, easygoing type game. And yeah, sure, there might be some things like in Stardew Valley, you've got the mines with your enemies and stuff. But in general, you can ignore that and you can just keep farming. And I think the thing that I like is there's very little stakes to it. And I guess if your point is from a game I want to solve a problem, then I
Yeah.
can see how that would not be something that would appeal to you.
Yeah,
Because
it's
everything about it is just like you can just write down exactly what the ideal way to do it is.
yeah. And I don't go to video games for meditative play, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't play games for the relaxation game. Like that's not a thing that interests interests me in that way. I have other things that I do for relaxation.
Yeah.
And for me, games, I prefer them to be active. I prefer them to get rid of that energy that I have that I don't have another place to put it. I like sort of the actions of them. It's why like it's funny because I was thinking about like I I am farming dungeons in Final Fantasy 14 because this is what they call it, which is you run the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again to get the materials you need to upgrade something.
Yeah.
And so, I'm in endgame. I'm farming all these dungeons, and I can do that apparently a lot. Like I do get tired of. Like I only do it once a week. Like I'm like tonight's my Final Fantasy night. I'm just gonna run all my things, and then I'm done for the week. And I'm gonna get the stuff because I can only get my rewards weekly anyways, and then I'll do whatever for the rest of the week. But in that time, it's a very active situation where I'm actively having to be engaged because even though I've done the mechanics 100 times and I know exactly what to do,
Yeah.
you still can mess it up, or somebody in your group can mess it up, and you have to compensate for it. And it's a much more active thing. Whereas for farming games, it's very much like I can't do fishing. I can't do fishing. Like Stardew Valley's fishing just confused me. I'm like, I don't know what buttons I'm supposed to do and why. And
Yeah. Fishing is generally the worst done part of any farming game. Uh,
and I know people who have only played Final Fantasy 14 only by fishing. They are
yeah.
level 80 fishers. And all they do is fish in the game. And I cannot think of anything worse to do with my time.
I'm
And
definitely with you there. I don't get deep into the fishing in these games. I do what is necessary to see whether it's good or not and review it on the podcast, and that's probably about it.
and oft like there are certain games that I think, okay, if it's got a really good storyline, then I might be able to get more into it. So like if I know that there is like the other thing that can get me apart from action is a really good story. And so I
Yeah.
need to know if the story is going to be really good. and often like a lot of these things are like, hey, and you can get married, and like Stardew Valley was the only time when you could actually marry a person of the same sex recently.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then even then the choices are like, well, I don't like any of these people. I don't
Yeah.
like them.
I think that the story is an interesting one, and actually, I think Stardew Valley has some really deep storylines once you get to know the characters, but there's always that problem of trying to get over that first hump,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of has the your traditional tropes of characters in farming games, and that works for some people, but also like there's not a huge amount that's hugely different. But there are definitely some characters that like the Linus, who's the guy who lives in the tent, is kind of he has a really deep and full storyline.
Mm-hmm.
But you actually have to actively work at that, and it takes a while to get to the point where he's willing to open up and start talking to you. So if you're just playing it to start with, you might not think there's anything there, and if you stop talking to him, you're not going to get anything. You actually have to kind of persist. You start off talking to Linus, and he's just like, "Oh, sorry, I don't trust people," or he just kind of runs away from you. He doesn't really do anything. And then once you've got to a certain point, then he starts actually. There's a point where you catch him, rooting through the bins for some food and stuff, and that's where he really starts to actually open up to you because he starts to trust you. But you actually have to actively work towards that and
Mm-hmm.
kind of push those boundaries. It's not like it doesn't it doesn't actively imply there's a story there very much, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that hard to do with people in real life. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
pack of pixels, tell me what tell me what I want to know.
There was actually there's a game called Littlewood, which is a lovely little farming game. But one of the things that it did before its final release, they removed this feature, but when you talk to people, it would deplete your energy. And I just thought that was I felt so seen there. I was like, this is introvert the simulator.
Yeah. Not all of us are introverts. Some of us get energy from talking to people. I think
Anyway, that
also
was removed.
it also helps me, like co-op helps me if I'm doing it with another
Yeah,
person.
yeah,
That will help me get across a lot of barriers. I struggle with single player of me just sort of sitting there. Like I ran into this with Animal Crossing, just me sitting there redoing my island for the
yeah,
400th time, and then opening it up for an hour for strangers to come in and be like, "Oh, that's cool," and then leave. And I'm like, I could just post pictures of this online, and it would be the
yeah.
same. And I still can't get rid of Hazel, so I'm done. I'm done with this game.
So here's a question:
Yes.
did you ever get into Minecraft? Because I suspect that probably has the same issues as farming games do for you.
No. I came to the idea of Farmcraft late in its early development,
Yeah,
and that's when the developer was still attached to it, and
yeah,
he is such a horrible person
yes.
that I was like, well, I don't ever need to do this, and I've never looked back.
Fair enough.
Like I've watched people play it, and that's the thing. Like I like watching people play these games. Like that
Yeah,
to me, watching people play farming games is very relaxing for me
yeah,
because it's watching TV and they're doing all these things, and I'm like, oh, cool, that's how that plays out. And so I can get a lot of my sort of needs met of relaxation while watching other people do it. And if they can play it with me, then I'm like, okay, let's plan, because then I feel like I have an active participant where we are working
yeah,
together towards a goal, and that level is good for me. So like there are things I like about there are basic aspects I like about farming games. Like I sort of like the collecting things. I like the building things.
yeah.
And I like that progression because I feel like I'm working towards something.
Yes.
And I've yet to sort of find one that allows me to do that and also has a really good story, but also doesn't make me have to come in every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the
So,
perfect storm of things. And, farming games aren't my main passion.
yeah, no,
Like,
definitely.
they are a third tier games of things that I look for. So it has to be outstanding for me to be on board. Like, I hate first-person shooters. I
Yeah.
I hate them. But I will always play BioShock because BioShock, the story that they put in that game was so interesting and grabbed you the minute the game happened that I didn't care that I was really, really, really bad at this game. I needed to find out what was going on.
Yeah.
And I haven't run into a farming game that has that hook that's like, at the end of this, there's a huge mystery that's going to be revealed, and it will be worth putting in the time. Because they're not built that way. They're built very meditatively.
They are. They are. I would say that I think there is one that I would consider that's like that, and that's Summer in Mara. But part of the problem is you're never quite sure whether a story will hit someone the same way it hit you.
Right.
But certainly, it felt much more like a game that had a story, and the kind of the story is what it was built around, and the farming was more of a, primary gameplay loop to get you to the story and get you through that. And it was very much built around this reason. I mean, it's not the deepest of worlds, but but I certainly felt like it was lived in, and I certainly was intrigued by the story and wanted to push through to the end. And the one thing I said in our review on that was, it's refreshing to have a farming game where there is an end. And yeah, sure, you can keep going if you want. You can keep farming forever. But you can get to that point and go, okay, I can put this down now. I can be done with this. That was nice. I enjoyed that, and I'm happy.
I think that's also a thing that I run into with a lot of farming games, is there's often not a definitive end.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to feel guilty about abandoning my animals.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to abandon my animals.
Yeah, it's even like Stardew Valley has an end to it, but the end to it is literally just you get the spirit of your grandfather comes and tells you how well you've done in the first 2 years, and some candles light up, and that's nothing else changes. Like, you unlock a couple of things to continue the game. Like, it's not really an end. Like, people talk about that as being the point you can get out if you want, but realistically, it's not, right? The game wants you to keep going. It gives you extra stuff, for goodness sake.
It's like, and now here's more things you can do.
Yeah, exactly. What I would say is I 100% agree with you on the coming in every day. I think that's kind of why I can't get back into Animal Crossing again, is because there's that cliff edge of, if I go in, I'm going to have to clear up all these weeds, and I'm going to have to deal talking to each of my animals is going to complain about where I've been for the past 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to deal with that nonsense. And I like when, with Stardew Valley or with Story of Seasons, you just go in and you're back to where you were at the beginning. There's no negative to not playing the game. I agree with you on that. I really hate when games punish you for not playing the game.
Yeah. I mean, so, like, it was the same problem with the initial stuff in berry farming in Pokemon, because all the berries had different growth times. Yeah. And back in the day, those growth times weren't easy to find. Like, you had to wait for either the guide to come out or hope somebody on some board was telling you the truth. And so that's that sort of time frame. And then if you missed it and you came back and it was empty, it's just like, why do you do this to me? Let me grow my stupid berries. And, they still haven't really gotten away from that. They've just made it a little bit easier. Like,
they've just turned it into not farming now.
Yeah. It's just the berry will fall and regrow and whatever. Like, okay, I'll get in when I get in. It's just, there are many things about farming games that I find fascinating. And I think, like, it as part of a much larger game. I mean, I will not lie. I am secretly very excited about getting my farm plot on the moon and putting on my little minions that I have been collecting forever and having them run around and do whatever, and the ability to grow and spend time on my farm while waiting to jump into other things. Because there are, like, at endgame, there's not a lot to do other than wait around for the queue to pop and you can jump into your dungeon that you're farming. So
Yeah.
having something else to do and be like, okay, I'm going to be here and I'll just play around over here. This is going to be an exciting addition. So,
Yeah.
like, I'm excited for that to be added to Final Fantasy 14. I'm very curious how it's going to play out. Have I shown you the picture? Did I even send you the picture? I'm going to send you the picture. Get into my Skype.
I don't see it.
Get into chat.
Yeah.
There. I sent you the link.
Oh yeah, got it now. That is. It doesn't look like the moon.
Yeah, but the moon you can't trust that the moon that we see is the moon. Like, the moon's a wild place. I've already seen that there's an entire city, and I know that there's a field of grass on the moon. They've already shown us that there's stuff on the moon.
Fair enough. I can see
But yeah,
pumpkins and tomatoes, carrots, celery, lettuce, lemons. Is that lemons? Turnips. Lemons is an interesting one. That would imply a larger selection of fruit as well, because you wouldn't just do lemons and no other fruit.
Yeah.
Broccoli, or is that just a green pumpkin?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But then you have all of your your minions that you've collected throughout the game. So you have the shark, and you have the otter with the hat.
That is a shark. Why is there a shark on land? Has it got legs?
Yes. It does have legs. Although there are some waterborne animals that just come up in a bubble of water. But also you have your chocobo and your horse. You have your riding bird and your horse right there. You have the fish people that is helping you feed your horse. So you can see the little guy with the tail. That's an entire race of creatures that are traders and farmers. You have multiple owls. Yeah, I'm excited for this part. I'm curious how it's going to play out. But the picture alone is like, everybody's like, all right, I'm sold. I'm sold on this picture. I will do whatever weird farming things, and I hope that you make it fun. What's interesting is you can have houses. So, like, you can have a house in Final Fantasy 14, and you can actually grow vegetables at your house that you can sell, because there is a cooking class in Final Fantasy 14. So there's you can go from level 1 to 80 as a cook if you want. And so there are gardeners who make vegetables that they put up on the market for people who don't want to do the farming part to buy the vegetables so they can just do the cooking part.
Fair enough.
So the question is if we are all assuming the farm is going to be separate from our homes, and we don't know if you can farm the same vegetables on your farm as you can at your home. We have a lot of questions about how farming is being implemented, and they haven't told us yet.
Yeah. This is dangerous information to have. I don't need a new game, especially a game that will never end.
It's free from level 1 to 60. You don't have to pay a dime.
No.
PlayStation and PC, we all play on the same servers. Doesn't matter how you access it. PC or PlayStation, we all play together. Play with your friends. Free from 1 to 60. I can give you a referral code. You and I get rewards.
So, I'm busy for the next month, so it's certainly not happening in the next month. Because it's not on Switch.
I will tell you now.
I can't play something not on Switch outside the house, right? It just doesn't work that way.
Right. The amount of people who have come back to Final Fantasy 14 in the last month is wild. The last expansion was a year and a half ago. And so you get patched everywhere. But like, the story has been over for a while. But now that the new expansion is coming out in November, swarms of people. I had a queue just to get in the game. I had a queue of 300 people the other day of just to log into the game. That's how many people have come back.
That's really interesting. Why are they making it? Because you said there's a 15 is out as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
So why are they adding a new expansion to the game a year and a half after the last one when there's a new game out?
So Final Fantasy 14 is its own world, right? It's the MMO. 15 is the single player continuation of the single player games. So 15 is its own story.
Oh.
All right. So Final Fantasy 14.
Welcome to the Final Fantasy podcast.
Yeah. So okay. So each number is its own story, and its own world. Asterisk, sort of. Final Fantasy XIV had a thing called one of its main stories. The main storyline of 14 at the very beginning is a cataclysm happened and destroyed the world, and so the nations that are left are recovering after the cataclysm. And what the most
Okay.
recent expansion did was say Final Fantasy 1 through 13 are all shards that fell off from this main world, 14. And so in the last expansion, we have gone to one of the shards, which means we went to one of the worlds of the other Final Fantasy games and played in that world. It's a fascinating take on why they're all separate. And in Final Fantasy XIV, a portal opened up, and some of the people from Final Fantasy 15 showed up for a couple of weeks and then left, which is why I have a car in Final Fantasy 14 as a mount, because you got the prince's car from that event.
Oh.
But the thing is you don't really need to know the lore. You don't need to know anything what happens in the other games because they're not tied together. There are common elements in all of them. So the summons that you get, so the summoners, the big primal spirits, Shiva, Ifrit, Garuda, those are the same across all the games. Those are universal gods that exist in all Final Fantasy games. But they're all shown differently in every game, and they do different things in every game because each game is its own unique universe. Final Fantasy XIV, being an MMO, has expansions. So Endwalker is the 4th expansion of playing in that world, and every expansion raises the level cap. So Shadowbringers brought us up to level 80. Endwalker will bring us up to level 90. And it will be a whole new storyline built off of everything that had come before. Because it's an MMO. It's never meant to end, right? Like you buy the next storyline and then you play through the next storyline. And then they add features. Yeah, it's a good game.
I don't know if I ever want to get into an MMO. It feels like a dangerous world to be in.
I think it's less dangerous than people think. At its heart, it's just an RPG. At its heart, it's Pokemon with a bunch of other people. What they do really well is enticing you to continue playing with your friends because there's so many things you can do with your friends. So the thing about MMOs is if you have a solid friend group that is there and always plays, it's super fun because you can set up a night, and this is when I meet my friends in Final Fantasy XIV, and we play the same game together, and we do all these quests together, and that's such a power that MMOs can have. It's what makes, I think, in Pokemon Sword and Shield, the wild area and the dens fun, especially like the 4-person dynamic of adventures. What made that fun is you could actually play with other people. And you could set a time aside, and you were doing things together. It captures that social aspect of MMOs really well, and that's the strongest thing behind MMOs. It's what keeps me playing MMOs is the storyline is usually good. There's always a single person storyline because you're going through a story that is focused on your character, like you're the main character of the story. But in between that storyline, you are still doing things with your friends in a world that you're sharing. And there is something very powerful about that. And I won't lie, MMOs, their whole thing is to keep you in their game economy. I will say that I don't play other games because I'm playing Final Fantasy XIV. And because I've decided I'm playing this one MMO, I don't buy a lot of other games. I have ultimately saved a lot of money than buying a $60 game every month that I finish in a month. People are like, oh, but you pay $12.95 a month to play this. It's like, it's true, but that's not the $60 that I was paying every month to play a new game for a month-long single-person experience that I completed. This, I get a lot of what I need out of this game, and can play it with my friends. And MMOs are not for everybody, right? Like, there are things that you have to do with people. They make it very easy to do those things with people. but that's just not for everybody. It's not. Like, if you don't enjoy the social aspect of playing with your friends or setting that time apart or making that commitment, or you find that difficult to do, or you don't have other friends to do it, then MMOs don't carry a big draw for other people, because at its heart it is just an RPG. It is nothing more. It's an RPG with some complicated controls.
Well, there you go. Farming games.
Yeah. And now they're introducing farming.
Well, I mean, it will be interesting to see, how you get on with that, whether, adding a farming aspect to a game you're already playing is
Yeah.
different to trying to play a game that is based around farming. I think the thing that I like most about farming games is just how varied the gameplay can be. Like,
Mm-hmm.
If you want to play Stardew and only fish, like you said, some people do in Final Fantasy 14,
Yep.
you can do that. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you can do that. If you want to entirely spend your time in the mines destroying creatures and getting treasures, you can do that. If you want to just farm, you can do that. If you want to just raise animals, you can do that. I like, and it feels like that's the sort of thing you get from MMOs, just in a different way.
Yep. Yeah.
Well,
I filled the time, didn't I?
yeah. Thank you for coming on and talking about Final Fantasy and
and farming game. Final Fantasy 14, your next farming sim. Your next best farming simulation.
Right. I promise that if I get sucked into the game, I will do an episode on it. I am not promising that I'll get sucked into the game at all.
Yeah. I mean, we also don't know if you have to get to level 80 to get your farm.
Oh, no. That means
So
I
we
actually
don't
have
know.
to pay for it.
Yeah, we don't know. Like, we don't know. Like, they have not been focused on
We'll see.
it. They just said it's coming, and we don't know anything else about it. We won't learn more until perhaps not until after launch. Like, we have no idea, other than they said, "Hey, we're putting this in the game."
Well, it looks like the PS5 version came out in May as well, so
Mm-hmm.
less excuses. We'll see what happens. No promises.
Nope.
Anyway, thank you for talking to me about farming games. Always
Yes.
interesting to get a different aspect on different viewpoint on these things. Where can people find you on the internet?
The easiest place to find me is on my personal Twitter at White Wing. I link to all the other things that I do off of that Twitter, so it's just the easiest way to find me. If you go there, I have links to all the stuff I do.
Do you want to plug any of that just now?
So if you like TTRPGs and you like actual plays, you can listen to Very Random Encounters, which is an actual play RPG where we randomize pretty much everything and play to see what happens. If you like Pokemon, it's super effective. The Pokemon podcast, where I talk way too long about nothing because there's been no news, but we somehow still make an hour and a half show out of literally nothing. I have a RPG out that I wrote myself called Glitter Hearts. The hard copy is printed but stuck in China because of shipping, but you can still pre-order that. And I have another book that I wrote about with the cast of Very Random Encounters called The Ultimate Random Encounters book that is on pre-order right now. If you want to look that up, it's bit.ly/randombook, and the R and the B have to be capitalized. But again, it's all on my Twitter. So go to @WhiteWing, hit me up. I'll point you to all my things. And I just got my copy of the book, and it's so good, and I'm so excited.
And if you want to hear more about, I've not decided exactly what we're going to discuss about, but we're going to talk about something to do with the book and or TTRPGs in general on the Patreon exclusive episode coming next week. So tune into that if you want that. I might actually make that exclusive to Patreon only temporarily. It might be a nice one to get out publicly after a specific amount of time. I don't like to do that too often, but it's nice to do it occasionally. That feels like a good one for it. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at the ScottBot. Scott has one T and bot is like robot. If you want to find the podcast on Twitter, you can find us at THSPod. If you want to email us, you can do that from our website, harvestseason.club. You can find links to everything related to us there, including our Patreon. If you want to subscribe and listen to our Patreon exclusive Greenhouse episodes where we talk about something completely unrelated, not that, Final Fantasy isn't unrelated, obviously.
More unrelated. Look,
more
I
more
made a
unrelated,
tie-in. They're bringing farming. I brought it in with a reason.
of course. I think that's everything. Thank you for joining me again, Greg.
Thank you for having me. This was super fun.
Thank you, listeners, for listening. And until next time,
Have a good harvest.
The Harvest Season is created by Rochelle Delaney and Al McKinley, with support from our Pro Farmer level patrons, Kevin and Stuart. Our art is done by Micah the Brave, and our music is done by Nick Burgess. Feel free to visit our website, harvestseason.club, for show notes and links to things we discussed in this episode. Thanks for listening.
Get that chocobo working in your fields.